Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Today is April 23rd, 2013, and I'm Faithless Forrest.
And I am Rachel Sheldon, and we want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you are not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and people curious about living a life free of supernatural beliefs.
This is a call-in show, and the number is on the screen. We're going to do an interview today, so we probably won't want to be taking calls right away, but maybe as we get a little further into the program. This show is a production of the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee and individual supporters and guests. Oh, you can tweet us comments today at @FFTVKNOX, and hopefully someone in the studio audience will be watching their Twitter account.
Today, if technology stays with us, we have a guest interview with Alan Hale, who on July 23rd, 1995, was a co-discoverer of the famous comet C-1995-01, better known as the Hale-Bopp comet, and we will discuss Earth's history. Alan, are you there?
We haven't called him yet.
Okay.
It'll be in a few moments. We want to thank viewers for being with us today, and let's thank our sponsors.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun meetup, often at a bar or restaurant. Tonight's meetup at Barley's is during happy hour after the show for food, drink, and conversation. To find us, just look for the silver-jacketed copy of The God Delusion standing upright on the table.
The Rationalists of East Tennessee have monthly activities on the first and third Sunday mornings. They're usually lectures with lively roundtable discussions. The second Sunday of the month is an afternoon book club. We'll say more about that during the program break. The fourth Sunday is the Reflections Gathering, which is a potluck get-together, usually at a member's home, with a discussion topic. And I'll start getting us to Alan. And we're pushing the button. And if the technology is with us, viewers, we'll soon be meeting Alan Hale. Hello, Alan, are you there?
Hello again.
Hello, Alan. Welcome to Freethought Forum. We should be on the air. Okay, well, I guess before we talk about maybe comets and the history of the Earth, we'd like to maybe learn a little bit about you. So start with the kind of basic things. Where were you born, raised, school?
Well, I was actually born in Japan, but that's result of having a father who was in the Air Force. But I was raised in Alamogordo, New Mexico, where my father retired from the Air Force and worked in the civil service for a number of years. I refuse to say that I grew up there because anyone who knows me knows that I really haven't grown up yet. So I graduated from the Naval Academy several years ago, more years than I would actually care to admit. And I earned my doctorate in astronomy at New Mexico State University. Even this is more years ago than I would care to admit, 1992. So I guess that's my formal education. Of course, I've gotten the regular education in the College of Life, which most of us seem to have to go through one way or another.
So what inspired your interest in science, and especially with astronomy?
Well, there were a number of things that contributed to that. One of those was, of course, Alamogordo is not a very, well, it's not a very large city even now. It was even smaller than back in the 60s. And we lived on the outskirts of town, and the sky was right outside my bedroom window, so to speak. And when I was in first grade, my father checked out some books on astronomy from one of the local libraries and handed them to me to see if I might be interested, and I guess it turns out that I was. A couple of other influences at that time. Of course, this was during the 1960s. This was the whole Apollo era, the rush to the moon, and all that. And I guess I got interested in that, got caught up all in that. There was also a TV show that was out during that time that kind of, I guess, got me interested a little bit. That the show was about exploring space a little bit. You might have even heard of it. It was called Star Trek.
Yeah, we've heard of that.
Yeah, I'm a Trekkie.
Oh, you have? Okay, I'm sorry.
That's great.
Sure.
So when you were probably 11 years old, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon, and everyone remember Neil's words, but I always like to challenge people and ask, do you remember Buzz's first words on the surface of the moon?
Beautiful, beautiful, magnificent desolation.
Magnificent desolation. Yep, that's great. I think it's far more poetic, but you're one of the few people who knew it. And for the viewer's benefit, I did not prompt him with an answer. All right, great.
I cheat a little bit. I know Buzz Aldrin, though. So.
Oh, man, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I've considered kind of privileged. I've met most of the Apollo astronauts that have walked on the moon. I'm sorry I never got a chance to meet Alan Shepard before he passed away. But there's two or three others that I haven't met, but I've met most of the others.
Well, that's really cool. I've read a lot of their books, but no in-person meetings.
I mean, well, Jack Schmitt, the geologist who was on Apollo 17, which was the last mission to the moon, is a native of New Mexico. In fact, he was a senator from New Mexico for a while back in the late 70s and early 80s, and that was right at the time when I was attending the Naval Academy. I visited him at his office, and of course I see him at conferences I go to from time to time. So I mean, Jack Schmitt and I are we're basically on first name basis.
Well,
and Pete Conrad was one of the primary engineers behind the whole Delta Clipper, the DCX concept, the single stage rocket that flew out here at White Sands Missile Range for a while back in the 90s. He passed away in a motorcycle crash a number of years ago, but I got to know Pete before he died, and he was an interesting character, to say the least.
Well, that's really cool. I guess the most that I know about Harrison Schmitt is from the book that the commander of Apollo 17 wrote, and of course I'm missing his name. The title was Last Man on the Moon. Yeah, there we go. Cernan. Great book. So maybe you could bring us up to date on some of the things you've done to help explore our solar system, and maybe tell us and the viewers about the role you had in the Voyager flyby of Uranus.
Yeah, that was a number of years ago. It seems like that's true of a lot of things now, but at that time I was a contractor for the Deep Space Network. Of course, that's based at JPL in California. And I actually worked with the radio science experiment, and that is where, just by using a spacecraft carrier signal, as it passed behind the rings and as it passed behind the planet, we were able to deduce information about the planet's atmosphere and about its rings. And somebody had the right software and that would tell the Deep Space Network antennas what frequency they had to tune to in order to receive the spacecraft signals. And I'm the guy who wrote that software and transmitted that information to the Deep Space Network stations, particularly the one in Canberra, Australia, which is the main DSN contact for that particular encounter.
And I think the Canberra facility is the one that was allegedly carrying the footage when Buzz and Neil stepped on the moon. I think that's kind of their claim to fame.
Yeah, that I don't know. It probably sounds right. I don't know for sure one way or the other. I mean, I've had a chance to visit the DSN facility at Canberra a couple of times, and nice place, nice folks there.
All righty. Well, Rachel,
I visited the one out of Goldstone, California, a few times too when I worked there. I worked at JPL.
Okay. Well, I keep asking all the questions here. I think Rachel's chomping on the bit too.
Yeah, a little, because actually I remember when the Hale-Bopp comet flew by, I was in 2nd grade, and my entire elementary school was just so excited about that. So that was was really interesting because, you know, I was just as excited as everybody else about the comet flying by, and I think that really inspired me. And also,
would that be your first occasion to go, observe things in the heavens other than maybe the sun and the moon?
Oh yeah, definitely, because at the time I was definitely more into dinosaurs and fossils and rocks.
Hey, you know what? I went through a dinosaur phase when I was in the 2nd grade.
Mm-hmm.
Me too. Me too.
I know them all. Drove my parents nuts.
Oh yeah, I was always carrying rocks into the house and like dirt and everything.
Well, here in East Tennessee, we have fossils from the Paleozoic era. Do you have Mesozoic dinosaur deposits there in New Mexico?
It depends on where you are. There are some fossil exhibits. There's one that was found not too many years ago down in the Robledo Mountains near Las Cruces. Footprints and everything else. Some kind of an amateur paleontologist was out just hiking in the mountains one day and down there and came across these. And of course, it's all preserved now. Up here in the mountains where I live, we have older fossils. There's fossils with I don't know from what era, because I'm not really an expert in this. Like I say, I only spent a year or so in the dinosaur fetish that I had. But we have like fossilized shells here, even some of the creek beds around here where I live. I've stumbled across them from time to time.
Well, that's cool.
And of course, another thing that's really, people say when people think of the Hale-Bopp comet is the Heaven's Gate tragedy. And for people in the audience who don't remember, it was in March 1997, 39 men and women committed suicide over 3 days because they believed that the Hale-Bopp comet had a spaceship behind it to carry their souls. And will you tell us a little what that was like for you?
I will say that was the busiest day. I mean, I have stories about my interaction with the media that would take up your entire broadcast time several times over. But that was by far the busiest media day that I had. And I was kind of in the dark about that. My first indication was she's my ex-wife now. She was my wife then. Is from San Diego originally, and she was out of town and had called me about a news report about a mass suicide north of San Diego. I mean, she would pick up on news from that part of the country, of course. And I didn't really think anything about it, and it was that next morning I had taken my sons to the bus stop so they could go to school. And little did I know, just in the time I was gone, the phone had rung about 4 times. And I was on the floor stretching out, getting ready to go do my morning run, when the phone rang again. And I picked up the phone, and it was some gentleman from CBS News Radio who wanted to know my thoughts on the latest developments out of San Diego. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. You're going to have to enlighten me a little bit. And he said something about mass suicide, 39 people, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And I replied, well, okay, I know about that, but what does this have to do with me? And then he said, well, they killed themselves so they hit you right on the spacecraft that's following your comet. And at that point, I said, oh gosh.
And he referred to it as your comet, like maybe you were responsible, right?
Yeah, something like perhaps, I don't know. I mean, there had already been a lot of stuff about this alleged spacecraft that was following it. There was a person in Houston who claimed to be an amateur astronomer who claimed that he had imaged this Saturn-like companion to Hale-Bopp. And of course, it was nothing more than a bright star. But you can't tell some people things like that. I was totally trashed on late-night talk radio as a result of that. But anyway, the phone calls started coming, and they started coming, and they started coming, and the phone literally never stopped ringing the entire day. Mm-hmm. And I decided that, one, I wasn't going to say anything until I knew a little bit more about what was going on. So I took about an hour and deliberately ignored the phone and just watched the news coverage so I could get an idea of what's going on. And decided I still wasn't going to say anything until I could put my thoughts together and issue a statement at a press conference the following day. And we did have a press conference. It was in Cloudcroft the following day at the resort hotel there. And I thought it was kind of cool, actually, because I called a press conference, and all these press people came from all over the country to hear me talk.
So what would be maybe the best part of that experience? You've talked about some of the negatives. Were there any good memories from that?
From Heaven's Gate, Or
Well, from trying to get the press to maybe listen to some reason, are there any who stood out as listening to reason?
well, I mean, I would say that the whole, not just let's not just concentrate on Heavenscape, but the whole media experience the whole time the comet was around, and I was going through it was more than 15 minutes of fame. It was a lot longer than that, of course. It was, there were some bright spots, there were some humorous spots. I did come across some reporters who knew what they were doing and knew what they were talking about. Ironically, I guess I got spoiled because the very first reporter that broke the story of the comet's discovery was the science reporter for the Albuquerque Journal. His name is John Fleck. And he called me 6 times that first day just to make sure he had his facts correct. And when the story appeared on the front page of the Albuquerque Journal the next morning, the article was very well written, but very well done. The guy had done his job, and I thought, okay, well, gee, this is what experience with the press was going to be like. Well, like I say, John spoiled me. The rest of the media type were mostly not like him. They would, there were some folks I would sit and go around the same things over and over and over again. They would still get it wrong. One of the, I guess, more humorous encounters I guess I could have with the press is I spent 45 minutes on the phone doing an interview with somebody from USA Today. And we spent 45 minutes talking about science behind the comet, and then she had to bring up the bit about the spacecraft. And this was before Heavenscape, I should point out. But after the bit about the spacecraft, or the so-called spacecraft following the comet. And I decided to crack a joke, and I said, I happen to live a 2 hours drive from a place called Roswell, which I'm sure you've heard of. I pointed out that is my comet, that spacecraft is following them, and I know they're going to be landing at Roswell, and when they go there, I'm going to go meet them and confront them because they're going to have to answer to me for following that comet. And anyone who heard me say that, knew that it was a joke, just like you. I heard you laugh.
Yeah.
Well, sure enough, after that entire 45-minute interview, the only thing they said about me was that Hale said that he will go to Roswell to meet the spacecraft when it lands. They never even said that Hale joked that. They said Hale said that.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and I guess the whole Heaven's Gate thing, as in, a lot of other cases, a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing, where, you know just enough to know that something's going on, but not enough to have the complete picture.
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment. The person that I was referring to, the so-called amateur astronomer who took the image that he claimed showed this object, he knew enough about astronomy to be able to locate the comet and be able to take a CCD image of it. But the review, it wasn't that he didn't know, he refused to listen to those of us who did know. And of course, trashed us and everything else, but whatever.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like a lot of creation scientists now.
Yeah. Well, that's not a new phenomenon. I dealt with some creationists. I dealt with some creationists during that time as well.
So I guess I hadn't thought about that. How do creationists spin things like a comet, a messenger from the heavens, so to speak? Anything remarkable there?
I don't. You probably would have to ask them what they might feel. I never have encountered any specific creationist thoughts on comets one way or the other. Really, they're objects in the sky, I guess, as far as they're concerned. I was especially a younger creationist probably would not cater too much to the idea of comets and asteroids being the building blocks from which planets are formed, because that is a process that took place over tens of millions of years, and of course, in their perspective, the universe hasn't been around for tens of millions of years, so.
Yeah, I actually read an article today about how they think that, evolutionists dated the moon wrong. Yeah, it made about as much sense to me as to. Yeah.
I mean, the ones I kind of enjoy are the ones who claim that I always have pointed out that since we routinely detect photons from objects that are so far away, it takes like billions of years to get here. The mere fact that we are seeing them tells us that those objects are billions of years old, or else the light wouldn't have gotten here.
Mm-hmm.
And so they like to answer with, well, maybe God created the light on its way to us, so created the light already here. And when you really think about that, you cannot disprove that.
Mm-hmm.
You can't prove that idea is wrong. So my rejoinder always been, well, in that case, maybe the entire universe was just created 2 minutes ago, and we were all created with memories that interact with each other. You can't prove that idea wrong either.
Yeah, that reminds me of a TV show I watched about the idea of, what if, we were just created, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks ago from somebody's imagination, and planted with those memories. Yeah. It's like, well, you can't really disprove that either.
You can't prove that idea is incorrect, but that means it's not a scientific idea, because a scientific idea means that if it's wrong, it can be proven wrong.
Exactly.
And the concept called falsifiability. And if an idea cannot be falsified, then it is not scientific. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Alan, let me help on this topic here a little bit. One of the visitors to an RET program, a presenter of a program some years ago, had a marvelous phrase that I love to share at every opportunity, and this is one of them. The people who practice this creation science and the people who are always wanting to try and show science wrong, they're actually engaged in a process this guy referred to as science envy, where they recognize that science has delivered on the goods. Science has cured diseases and lengthened our lives and done all the things that they used to advise people to pray for, but that nothing fails quite like prayer. And so they're trying to play in the science arena because they're hoping that some of the glory of science will rub off on their tarnished ideas.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept, interesting thought. Isaac Asimov, I'm sure you've heard of him.
Oh, definitely.
Had a similar phrase for that. He called it the judo argument.
Right. Tell us about it.
Yeah. And what he meant by that is that it's where creationists try to use science against science. They try to use their opponent's strength against them. So they'll come up with scientific-sounding arguments to argue against science, so to speak.
Yeah, one that we've had callers to our show try to wrestle with is, the second law of thermodynamics they claim would prevent life from evolving or life from coming into existence. And
yes,
and when asked what the second... I'm sorry I spoke over you.
No, I kind of spoke over you, but that's a classic one. And anyone who advocates that argument doesn't even know what the second law of thermodynamics is really saying. So.
Yeah. For our viewers' benefit, do you have a handy way to describe that? I know this is a challenge, well, a tough one. I've put thought into it, and I'm catching you unprepared, maybe.
No. What the second law of thermodynamics basically says is that energy available to actually accomplish work always decreases, or another way of saying it is that entropy, which is energy unavailable to do work, always increases. But that only applies to a closed system. Example I always use is, if you want to use the creationist picture of the second law of thermodynamics, picture a human baby, okay? According to their interpretation of the second law of thermodynamics, that baby could never develop into a full-grown human being.
Right. Right.
But we all know that it does. I mean, I've got two sons, and they started off as little babies, and they're fully grown now. One of them's taller than me, and the other one is the same height as me. And because we had to put energy into it that came outside of us, we had to feed them. We had to take care of them. And so there was a decrease in entropy by watching them grow, but there was the increase in entropy elsewhere in the system by having to feed them. Entropy is sometimes considered equated not entirely correctly with randomness and disorder. Any parent can tell you that raising children creates a lot of disorder. But all that is more than made up for by the increase in entropy or decrease in entropy by watching someone grow. So the entire system may have increased entropy but there was nevertheless some places where there was an entropy decrease by watching the small child grow from a small child up into an adult human being.
Yeah, there you've done it. I guess one of the other kind of related arguments we get is the assertion that somehow evolution is a claim that something analogous to a 747 was assembled by a tornado sweeping through the parts factory. And in reality, that's sort of their claim. That's what the Bible says, that, yeah, we just had this mud and dirt, and the deity sort of swirled through and turned it into a man.
Yeah, it would sort of have a dirt man and a rib woman.
A dirt man and rib woman, yeah.
Yeah, well, it didn't, because all this happens one step at a time, and I think, but of course, if you believe that the Earth is only 6,000 years old, then there hasn't been enough time for things to go from carbon molecules to human beings. So,
Alan, a few moments ago, you mentioned one of my favorite authors, Isaac Asimov. I refer to him as both an author of science fiction as well as what I called straight science. That's before I heard the term popularizer of science. And in many ways, I will credit him as my first physics teacher. He's the man who even taught me what the word physics was. But there's another author that has written some very compelling novels, and there's one, and I'm wondering if perhaps you've ever read one of his novels and would understand maybe what his imaginary protagonist might have gone through. I'm referring to the novel Lucifer's Hammer.
Mm-hmm.
Have you read that one?
Oh yes, I've read that.
Before or
written by Larry Niven and Jerry Purnell.
Yeah. Did you read it before or after July 23rd, 1995?
Both.
Okay, but before you did.
At the late 70s, and then I read it again sometime after Hale-Bopp. Interesting coincidence. The comet in that book was named Hamner Brown.
Yes.
Which is HB.
Yes.
And you see where I'm going with that.
Yeah, so...
HB, Hale-Bopp, HB also.
Yeah, any other coincidences that perhaps you are far more acutely aware of?
Yeah. Well, this is not a coincidence, really. It was more just kind of worked out this way. I was attending, I go to space conferences and space meetings from time to time. There was a space meeting here in my local area just a few years ago. It was actually to celebrate the DCX single-stage rocket that flew out here at White Sands, and I mentioned it a little while ago. And there was an anniversary celebration of that. And who comes to this meeting but Larry Niven and Jerry Purnell? So I had a chance to meet both of those interesting characters. I will admit I am not an autograph hound, but I had to get their autographs on my copy of Lucifer's Hammer. I also gave them autographed copies of my book so they could remember who I was. Jerry Purnell in particular was one of the very strong advocates for a concept like the DCX. So it was very expected for him to be in a meeting like this, and he kind of dragged Larry Niven along with him. So I'm glad I got to meet both of those guys.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, I was reading some numbers about C 1995-01, your comet, and it's actually a very big body, and and it occurred to me that it could have done tremendous damage if it had come to rendezvous with us.
Oh yes, it would. It would have been.
This must be the kind of question people ask you all the time. How do you address this and compare it to that KT event that everyone knows about, or at least everyone ought to know about?
According to studies of this, the subterranean crater has been identified in the Yucatan that was caused by the KT impactor, and the studies seem to suggest that that object was perhaps 10 kilometers or 6 miles, depending on which language you speak, in diameter. Hale-Bopp was the nucleus in that one. We never quite got a good look at it because it remained shrouded in gas and dust, and it never came close to Earth. But the kind of going idea is that Hale-Bopp's nucleus was 25 miles or 40 kilometers in diameter. So it was actually a much, much, much bigger object than the KT impactor.
Mm-hmm.
So had it had Earth in its sight,
that's a really big snowball.
Just put it this way, I don't know that scientists have actually used the phrase extinction level event. I think that was something coined by Hollywood, but it probably would have been something along those lines.
Yeah. In the course of reading material all over the internet, and we all know the value you can place in that, I read some speculation that perhaps Hale-Bopp had swung through the solar system once before, back in historic times. What do you know about the current understanding on that?
Well, we do know, just from studies of its orbit, that it has been around at least once before.
And when would that have been?
That would have been about roughly 4,000 years ago. And I know there were people that were trying to comb through records to see if they could identify any records of it from that time. But of course, we don't know exactly when it would have been, for one thing. Second thing is that even if records have survived from that far back, any accounts would be so intertwined with the mythologies of whoever made those records that it would be impossible to extract anything meaningful from them. Or I won't say impossible, but very difficult. And to my knowledge, there hasn't been anything positively identified.
Okay. The website I found, and I don't know if it was Wikipedia or not, it was speculating that one of the pharaohs of, I think, the Old Kingdom might have been claiming a comet that might have been Hale-Bopp as some sign of divine approval.
I mean, that's conceivable, but depending on when this took place and all that. But again, the records would be so hopelessly intertwined with the myths of the time that when trying to make a positive identification would be, again, if not impossible, at least very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Alan, Rachel, we're about at the halfway point. If we could ask Alan to be patient with us, we would like to do our sponsor acknowledgement section here. This will take us a couple of minutes, and why don't we jump into this, Rachel?
Mm-hmm.
All right, viewers, in case you're just tuning in, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by them and by individual contributions. Shows are live most Tuesdays from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern on Community Access Television. Tell your out-of-town friends to see us streaming online at ctvknox.org.
This is a call-in show, and we are live today, April 23rd, 2013, and viewers can call in now to the number on the screen or tweet them to us at FFTVKnox.
All right, and the Atheist Society of Knoxville, or ASK, meets 1 or 2 times a week. We have evening meetups for fun, food, drink, and conversation. ASK's purpose is to supply a venue for community, camaraderie, and outreach to atheists, agnostic, freethinkers, and other like-minded persons in the East Tennessee area. Go to meetup.com and search for atheists and Knoxville to find the group. And Sam, can we get the video at this time? There we go.
Knoxville area and are questioning your religious beliefs or simply believe in one less God than everyone else? Well,
Sure,
you're not
yeah.
alone. The Atheist
And Alan,
Society of
there's
Knoxville is
about
a
a
fun
30-second
and friendly group
video
of
running
people
here.
just like you that
We'll
meets
talk
twice a
then
week
about
at a
the
bar or
rationalist
restaurant.
briefly,
We
another
meet every
30-second
Tuesday
video,
night following the
and then maybe
show at
invite
Barley's
callers
Tavern and
to call
Pizzeria
in
for
and
happy
ask
hour.
questions
You'll
about
find our group
astronomy
either
or
inside
whatever.
or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book,
And then
The
if no one
God
calls
Delusion,
in, we got some
standing
stuff
upright on the table.
about
On Fridays,
The
we meet at
Earthrise
Agave
Institute.
Azul
Earthrise
or the
Institute
Beer Market.
and
But if you plan
maybe,
to preach, proselytize, provoke or
formation
punch,
of the
please
solar
don't.
system and,
We all
and
question
comets
what we
origin,
believe at
if we
one
can
point
talk
in our
about that.
lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun. Do you?
The Rationalists of East Tennessee has Sunday activities involving lively presentations and discussions of subjects topical and timeless. Once a month, we get together for a book club. You need not have read the book to attend, but of course it helps. Visit rationalists.org to find us.
And
Do
Sam,
you find stories of talking snakes laughable? Do you prefer the scientific method over supernatural beliefs? Are you concerned about religious leaders and organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalists of East Tennessee meets weekly for fellowship and provides a forum for people who support skeptical thinking and rational discussion of these and other issues. To find out more information or to find out about our next meeting, visit us on the web at www.rationalist.org.
Well, great. Both the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee help provide a social outlet where you'll find that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone. The Rationalists of East Tennessee Book Club coming up next month, this month and next month, May and June, are like this. May 12th is Answers for Aristotle, How Science and Philosophy Can Lead Us to a More Meaningful Life by Massimo Pigliucci.
Pigliucci.
Alrighty, I said corrected. June 9 is Collapse, How Societies Choose to Fail or Succeed, a revised edition by Jared Diamond. Alright, well, we're swinging back into the studio here with Hale-Bopp, Alan Hale, discoverer of the great comet Hale-Bopp. Alright,
And so we know that you're involved with the Earthrise Institute, and so I read on the website that the mission is to use astronomy and space to bring humanity together. Will you tell us a little about that?
Okay, I would say that the entire concept of that was created in my mind. I had the opportunity in 1999 to travel to Iran to view a solar eclipse there. I don't think I have to explain to an American audience why a trip to Iran was kind of an exceptional deal. I mean, I was actually a midshipman at the Naval Academy during the embassy seizure in Tehran. And a lot of members of my graduating class considered it at least possible that we would be graduated early and sent over to fight. And so I, like most Americans, had had this view of Iran as religious fanatics, etc., etc. Now, at that time, the president of Iran was Mohammad Khatami, and he had an interview with CNN where he had argued for what he called the dialogue of civilizations between the U.S. and Iran, and was asking for an exchange visits of scholars between the two nations. And I read about that, and I said to myself, well, whether or not I'm a scholar or not might be debatable, but I'm sure people in Iran saw that comet just like people elsewhere in the world did. And maybe I should take this man up on his offer. So it's a very long story. It took a year and a half to bring about, and it almost fell apart at the last minute. But I was able to get a group of American scientists, students, and educators together, and we spent over 2 weeks traveling around Iran and giving talks and we did see the eclipse, and we had a good old time. people in Iran were very friendly, very welcoming to us, and it occurred to me that science is kind of a universal language, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And it'd be a great idea if we could use science as a tool for bringing people together, and especially bringing students together. So that kind of was the impetus for the idea behind Earthrise. And so I've been working on various facets of that ever since. Unfortunately, as many other things in life, it takes money in order to accomplish much of anything. And some people are great at raising money, and others are not, and I'm in the latter group. I've written grants and gotten some grants funded from time to time, and have done some things. I've never really raised enough money to really do as much as I would like. I'm still working on it, still trying different things. I've been back to Iran once since then. I've made one other trip to the Middle East. I've visited Lebanon a few years ago. Some people I had met via some of the activities that I've been involved in. So was kind of the whole idea. It's education, science education, promoting science education. I work with some of the educational institutions here in this area, but it's also, again, the idea of using this universal language of science as a means of breaking down barriers between nations and between cultures.
So do you think that science has an important role in diplomacy?
I believe it does. In fact, I've used the expression science diplomacy. I don't know if it's an original expression or not. At least I don't remember hearing it anywhere else, so I'll take credit for it if no one else will. As a very important concept. I mean, again, the sky looks the same from Iran as it does from here in the U.S. It's the same sky we study. If a scientist in Iran studies the sky and makes measurements, a scientist here in the U.S. will come to the same conclusions, or should at least come to the same conclusions as the scientist in Iran comes to.
Yeah, and maybe
science does not know political boundaries.
Yeah, and maybe, they'd get things done faster if they were communicating with each other.
So anyway, that was the whole idea behind it, and I'm still committed to that idea. A colleague of mine named Mike Simmons has created an organization called Astronomers Without Borders.
Oh.
And he lives in L.A. He has access to a lot more money than I've ever had access to. So he's been able to take the idea and run with it. And actually has created a very good organization. And I think, I know Mike, he's a good friend of mine, and he also went to Iran for that very same eclipse. I think he got the same idea that I had. And we ended up meeting a lot of the same people and over in that country. And so that's, I really applaud the kind of work they do, because, again, it's using astronomy as this diplomatic tool.
Mm-hmm.
The people that you met in Iran, were there any memorable moments there, good questions you were asked, things they surprised you about?
I had a lot of very memorable experiences, and the ones that stick out to me the most were the expressions of extreme warmth that I encountered from many of the people over there. I could tell a number of stories. I guess one of them was, we were visiting this archaeological museum, which was an old castle in the city of Karamabad. And I was walking up to there, and there were two Iranian gentlemen walking down. And I guess I don't look Iranian. So they asked me in English where I was from. And I thought to myself, well, I'm going to try an experiment here and see what happens. And I told them I was from America. And their eyes just lit up, and they grabbed my hand, and they shook it, and told me how glad they were that I was there, and I was living in their country, and all that. One other memorable event along those lines, this gets to be a very long story, and I'll shorten it real quick, but for the first week or so of our visit, all we really had for meals were meat kebabs. It was a private joke among members of our group, but that's just kind of the way it worked. We were in the city of Isfahan the night before the eclipse, and our host took us to a burgers and pizza place. And we were all ecstatic because, all right, burgers and pizza, yay. But one of the members of our delegation was the Apollo astronaut, Rusty Schweikert. And Rusty and I, being kind of the well-known people in our delegation, we were asked to give an interview with Washington Post while we were at this restaurant. So Rusty and I were off doing our interview away from our group, and then we had to finish the interview, and then we were joining our group. So I was walking back to our group, and there was a table with a bunch of guys in the late teens, early 20s, and one of them stopped me as I was walking by and said that after 20 years, it's great to have Americans back in Iran again. So those are more the experiences I remember from my visits to that country.
Okay, we'd like to remind people that this is a call-in show. If you want to call in and with a question or comment, the line is available.
We have here with us today Alan Hale, co-discoverer of the great comet that we saw in our skies in 1997. And we can ask him, you can call in, ask him questions about astronomy and science and, you know, I guess his trip to Persia. As you were talking, I, of course, had questions. I've told myself that if I ever had a chance to visit Iran, I would love to go see the great city of I guess, Xerxes, whose name I always mispronounce.
Persepolis.
Persepolis. Did you guys get by there?
I actually visited there on both trips. We were, I mean, you know, the ruins are quite impressive, and it's certainly worth seeing. On the second trip, there were some new members of our group, and so for a lot of the people in our group, it was a first-time visit for them. They hadn't been there before, but there was a gentleman that had been on our first delegation. He was a solar physicist, and we had been on the previous trip. So this is kind of old hat for us. We wanted to go see something new. Well, there's a range of hills not too far from where Persepolis is located. And there's some ancient tombs up there. So he and I were just up there poking around on, around the mountains there and around the hills. We came to one of these tombs, and there was a guard there at the entrance to this tomb. And these tombs are supposed to be off limits to the public. But this guard saw us, and he invited us into this tomb so we could saw this burial ground of this ancient king from ancient Persia way back when. And my friend and I were both kind of amazed because we saw something we're not really supposed to see. But anyway.
Okay, I think we have a caller.
That's a nice thing that they accommodated you that way. Alan, we have a call here. We're going to push the button and address the caller. Hopefully you'll be able to hear. We'll help if not. Caller, welcome to Freethought Forum. Can we get a name or a nickname, please? Okay, caller, you are going to have to mute your television and listen to us on the phone. Mute your television now.
Oh, okay.
There we go. All right, now listen to us and speak on the phone because the television has a 7-second delay. That makes the conversation impossible. Please give us a name or a nickname.
Oh.
Caller, mute your television now.
All right. Well, you're gonna go to hell.
All right, well, thank you for that important message. We'll wish you a better day than you've wished us. Okay. Well, Alan, apparently we've been informed we're going to hell. I'm not sure if that will be as interesting an excursion as visiting Persia.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's see. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I have to collect my thoughts. I got involved thinking about visiting the city whose name I can't pronounce, Persepolis. Did they let you walk the steps? There's a fantastic, what looks like a stairway there. Or do you just look at it from a distance?
Oh, we were walking all through the ruins and everything else.
Oh man, I gotta go. All right.
Yeah, it was definitely a worthwhile experience. I mean, the whole visit to the country was a worthwhile experience, even after 2 weeks of kebabs.
Okay, I'm kind of curious what you're thinking about. I assume you've heard about NASA's plans on catching an asteroid in a bucket?
Yeah, in fact, I just wrote an article on that.
Where will we find your article?
I write a weekly column on astronomy and space that appears in the local newspaper here.
Oh, okay.
I've been doing it for many, many years now. So, yeah, it's an interesting idea. I guess I remain skeptical with considering how NASA budgets go and everything else, that it will actually happen very close to the time frame that is being talked about. I guess we'll just wait and see. I think it's an interesting engineering challenge. There's a common misperception, I think Hollywood kind of feeds this misperception, that asteroids just hang around floating in space. And no, they don't. They are in orbit around the sun just like everything else is, just like Earth is. And they have their own orbital velocity. And so any spacecraft launched from Earth, of course, has its own orbital velocity combined with Earth's orbital velocity. So you have to match orbital velocities with the object you are trying to capture. And then you have to change its orbital velocity, put it into an intercept orbit with Earth, and then you have to change its velocity again to match Earth's orbital velocity. And all that requires energy. And energy means fuel, which means money, which comes from budgets that are constantly being cut. So we'll have to see if it happens. The idea, of course, is to find a relatively small asteroid. And here we're talking something, 20 meters or so in diameter. So we're talking something pretty small. That doesn't have a lot of mass. A smaller object means less energy required. And if you find something that's small like that in an orbit that is very similar to that of Earth and an orbit that's nearly coplanar with that of Earth, then that makes this whole, what we in the field call delta V, or change in velocity, makes that as small as we can, then our energy expenses go down. So assuming that an object like that can be found, then there are objects definitely like that. I don't think that's really not going to be an issue. Then, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
That sounds cool. Alan, we've
is that we could actually have a real asteroid here to study, see what it's made of, see what structural makeup might be. So it's definitely an interesting concept. We'll just see if it happens.
All right. Well, Alan, we've been notified there's another caller. Let's try this again. Perhaps this caller will be more civil.
Hey, caller, can we have a name or nickname?
Yes, this is Charles.
Hi, Charles.
And I'm from Illinois, and I have a question for your guest. I understand that while the comets are basically very large, dirty snowballs, isn't it true that they've also been able to, when they're doing their spectranatural, the study of the light, I can't pronounce some words, that they've discovered that some of them have organic compounds in them?
Alan, did you hear that question?
I think I caught parts of it. I heard dirty snowballs.
And he was asking if it's true that comets have organic compounds in them.
That is definitely true. We've known that it's been true at least since Halley's comet returned in 1986, and there were spacecraft that went out to encounter it, and they encountered evidence for numerous organic molecules, including formaldehyde, among others. And, of course, for the audience, organic molecules simply mean molecules that contain carbon, and they're the molecules upon which life is based. At least Earth life, as we know it, is based. So there are many organic molecules that have been detected within comets, within interstellar dust clouds with radio telescopes. We've detected the signatures of various organic molecules in interstellar clouds, and comets definitely contain these. And Of course, a lot of asteroids contain these as well, and as I think we kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, it was the comets and asteroids that basically created the planets in the first place. So, and the asteroids and comets we see today are the leftovers of that process. And so over natural history, comets and asteroids have delivered these organic materials to the Earth, and that is probably where life on Earth got its start, was the delivery of organic molecules to Earth by these objects.
Okay, Charles, did we answer the question?
Yes, that's what I was thinking, that abiogenesis, after the Earth cooled off after the big smash hit from the that generated the Earth-Moon system, that after it cooled off, the organic chemicals that would be needed for abiogenesis was delivered by the comets and so forth, because they wouldn't generate the kind of temperatures that the big smash from the Cerberus, I think they call it, that generated the Earth-Moon system.
All right, have you got a follow-on question? We've got just about 2 minutes left of conversation time. If you got some...
What is the newest one they spotted, ISO 13 or something, ISN 13 something or other? That's when is it due to be close enough to maybe to be seen?
Alan, did you get that? He's asking about the new comet this fall.
Okay, there's actually two comets inbound that are worth discussing. He's referring to a comet called ISON, which is an acronym. Most comets these days are discovered by automated survey programs, and they're named not necessarily after the people who find them, but after the programs that find them. And ISON is an acronym for International Scientific Optical Network.
And we've got about a minute and a half here.
Okay, and that comet passes very close to the sun at the end of November, and somewhat close to Earth afterwards. And if it lives up to its potential, this could become a very bright comet in our skies November and December. The one other comet that's inbound that's interesting was discovered back in January by the Sighting Spring Survey in Australia, and it's called Sighting Spring. In October of next year, i.e. October 2014, this comet passes extremely close to the planet Mars. And at this point, although the probability is very low, we cannot rule out an impact with Mars at this time.
Wow, that's cool news.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's thank Charles, and we invite you, if you're local, to come down to Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria and meet us after the show. And
I live in Illinois.
Oh, well, thank you for watching from all that way. If you come through East Tennessee sometime, join us then. We'll say,
I will.
We're going to say bye for now, and we'll hope to hear from you another time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. Well, we're coming up on the last minute of the show here. Maybe we should thank Alan for calling in and devoting his afternoon to helping us here in East Tennessee learn about astronomy and some science. It's time to start wrapping things up. Get out your pen and paper. This has been Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Faithless Forrest.
And I'm Rachel Sheldon. Please send us feedback. Leave voicemail at 865-272-9060 or email us at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com.
You can see the show on Tuesdays from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on these Knoxville stations, and at 2100 Greenwich Mean Time online, ctvknox.org.
We would like to send our thanks to Alan Hale, to Sam, to Jonas, and anyone else for technical support, and to the staff at CTV Knox, and to all our callers.
All right. Alan, do you have any words to send us off? All right.